Trade alert. Maybe not the one you expected, maybe not the one you hoped for. Garnet Hathaway goes to Florida in exchange for a fifth and a fourth. The fifth this year. We also trade away a sixth this year alongside Garnet Hathaway there. So it's effectively a trade up from the sixth to the fifth, and then a future fourth. Both picks are Florida, so this year, certainly a down year for Florida. A little bit of an earlier fifth. But next year, that fourth, probably more of an early fifth, like this year's pick. You look at Garnet Hathaway, what he meant to this team, and Danny Briere trading him out of all places to a Florida. This is what Garnet Hathaway, if he was to move, what he deserves, frankly. And Danny Briere showed, look, with Nick Delorier going to Carolina, eventual Cup champ. He wants to do right by his players. And hopefully that gets noticed by more and more significant, notable figures around the league, whether it be agents or players themselves, as far as opening up doors. Maybe just a little bit of a difference in the future. One thing leads to another. Maybe it's not the biggest name who comes in the door, who takes note, but then a year or two from now, that name is great friends with an Austin Matthews or a Connor McDavid. Garnet Hathaway embodied the Flyers' quote, new era of orange, the infancy of this rebuild, the transition phase here. Garnet Hathaway, a player that was beloved, and rightfully so. This timing makes sense. It makes sense for the Flyers now even more to bring back a Luke Glendening. You think about that really rugged, a playoff, successful playoff line, a Glendening, a Coots. Now we can get creative. Didn't really make sense to keep Garnet Hathaway at the expense of acquiring 2 mid-round picks that you could use in who knows what move down the line here. Guys, what do you think of this trade? I think it's very fair value, and I wish Garnet Hathaway nothing but the best here. Hopefully a bigger trade is to come. Is it a Garnet Hathaway one day? Jason Robertson the next? Jason Robertson apparently turned down a $15 million contract over the max 8 years from the Seattle Kraken, who notably have zero income tax, equivalent to a Florida in that sense. So what do we learn from that? At the end of the day, the tax, the motivation as far as destination, in this case, and I think in most cases, clearly not the end-all be-all. You want to go somewhere where you can win. Does Jason Robertson see the Flyers as a potential destination? Does it make sense for the Flyers? I think it could make sense for the Flyers in a very specific type of trade. Owen Tippett, I don't think it makes all that much sense to trade him for Jason Robertson. Look, depending on the nuts and bolts of this deal, the Flyers, rightfully so, covet Owen Tippett. The value that he offers, his game, in addition to his just $6.2 million AAV, is Jason Robertson 2.5x the player of Owen Tippett? I don't think so. Certainly the Flyers, I could tell you, they do not think so. Clearly the Flyers are in no motivation to trade Owen Tippett. What about Tyson Foerster, though? Tyson Foerster, the reason I bring up Tyson Foerster is because, look, as a guy who plays on the left, as a legit goal scorer, you bring in a guy who's just about 2.5 years older in a Jason Robertson, who is an elite, a 45 multiple-time goal scorer, nearly 100 points this past year, has demonstrated an ability to go almost 110 points, and was a critical, important piece in a playoff push that fell short, of course, to the Minnesota Wild, but was one of, if not their best players. You look at Jason Robertson's production over that 6-game series. 8 points, not too shabby whatsoever. Can a Tyson Foerster Rasmus Ristolainen, and a first-round pick plus. Does that potentially get you Jason Robertson? That's a trade I'd be willing to make. Jason Robertson as an impact top 6 left winger right away. Provides immense amount of offense. The Flyers, we understand, this offseason, after what we just saw, taking a step into next season, incredibly stout defensively. There's a lot to be desired on the power play. There's still a lot to be desired, quite honestly, offensively in general. In terms of goal-scoring ability, Jason Robertson provides that. That's the very narrow, specific avenue that I think it would make sense for the Flyers to acquire him. A top winger has to go out, but I don't want to ship the most elite skater, the most dynamic on this Flyers roster. Team speed already not the best. Why then make it extremely not ideal as far as the complexion of this team? It's draft day. It is draft day. I want to talk about one Craig Button, who is in a unique position, a bit of a prophet as far as mock drafts when it comes to the Flyers specifically. You look at the last 3 first-round picks the Flyers have made. He predicted, he mocked Porter Martone and Jack Nesbitt last year. Had Nesbitt going at 22, our second of 3 first-round picks originally heading into last draft. And then we go, wait, let's go another draft. He predicted the Flyers to draft Jet Luchenko. Look, as an ex-NHL exec, Craig Button, he has unbelievable contacts, and he also has an ability as an evaluator. You look at Ilya Morozov at pick 21, a 6'3", a big center who's Russian-born, has been over here in the States for a few years now. He played in Miami, Ohio, in arguably the toughest conference, or one of, next to the Big Ten. You have the likes of Western Michigan, Denver, North Dakota. Miami, Ohio was just not one of those top dogs. Morozov offensively just did not have that great of an output. But keep in mind, he was also the youngest player in the NCAA. 17 years old, still 17. Couple more years in the NCAA could do absolute wonders for him. Could absolutely see a resurgent offensive type of output. For a guy who, in the first handful, 3 to 5 games on the schedule, against, of course, a little bit of the lesser competition, did have a dominant scoring output. So it makes you wonder if, say, he, in the modern era, say a transfer to a Michigan State, for example, what would that potentially look like? Ilya Morozov, I would be intrigued. If this is the way the Flyers go, I am thinking about a potential Matvei Michkov line mate. I'm thinking about the chemistry. Can a Michkov elevate Morozov? Really interesting name. Let me know what you guys think of Ilya Morozov, should he be the Flyers' 21st overall pick. Rounding things out, let's talk about my draft predictions here. Will the Flyers make the 21st overall pick? That's where I want to start. I think they do. I think the Flyers will make their 21st pick. I think they sit there. I think they also make the 25th pick. I am saying, I'm going out on a limb here, guessing with all the noise about Risto and the Ottawa Senators. I think they trade in some type of nuts and bolts 25th pick from Ottawa that they acquired in that Brady Tkachuk trade. 25th pick goes to Philly. Risto goes to Ottawa. Who do I think we pick at number 21, at number 25? I think the Flyers at pick 21 select Maddox Dagenais, listed as a center, 6'3", big, at point per game in the queue with Quebec. Why specifically Dagenais? I think he could provide some dynamic offense, even if, by his own admission, shout out to Russ Cohen, at the draft combine, sees himself as more of a winger. But I think the Flyers have a specific interest in Dagenais when you consider the relationship between the Quebec Remparts organization, Simon Gagne, as that GM, as one of the senior leaders of that group. You also look at Nathan Quinn. Nathan Quinn, a former Flyers 5th round pick, a little bit undersized, a center, a line mate of Dagenais. Could there be some chemistry down the line in the future? I think the Flyers, they have all the intel they could actually wish for when it comes to Dagenais. I think he's the pick at number 21. And frankly, I would give it a solid B. At pick 25, I think here the Flyers go defenseman. And I'm going bold here. I think the Flyers go with another player from the queue, Xavier Villeneuve. The dynamic, undersized, left shot defenseman who has left something to be desired defensively. But you think about the Lane Hudsons, the Cole Hudsons of the world who just fell down the board in past drafts inexplicably. A little bit prospect fatigue in a way, overly critical in terms of consensus, critique, perception, maybe hard time envisioning the player ultimately at the NHL level. At the end of the day, at a pick like 25, when you're also picking 21, let's go a little bit maybe safer. Let's go for an upside swing. And I think it's going to be Xavier Villeneuve, who is a Boston University commit. Talk about the Hudson track there. In the event the Flyers draft Xavier Villeneuve, who could be truly a transcendent power play quarterback option for the 15% power play over the last several years, guys, I would love Villeneuve to the Flyers. I would give it a B+, A- type of pick, knowing that there is certainly some risk, but there could be some reward. Guys, let me know your draft predictions down below, your reactions. Have a fantastic weekend. Here's to some Flyers movement, baby.